Our next presenter recently was himself honored at the New York Albert Schweitzer Award dinner in May with the Alumni Achievement Award. He is the Executive Vice President of Whistle Sports Network. Please welcome Brian Selander.
So Beau loved to start speeches off by this inspirational quote from Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And you'll be inspired by it too. It was, "Be brief, be sincere, and be seated." All right, so maybe that's not so inspirational. But since we're here to honor Beau's legacy and Beau's service and Beau's dedication and Beau's commitment, let's honor as well Beau's desire to keep speeches to a minimum. This award is, as they've been said, has gone to presidents and heads of state and governors. And for those of you that knew Beau, there was no question at all that that is where he was headed if we had just had a little bit more time with him. The last real conversation Beau and I had was on a train back from New York City in real Beau fashion. He saw somebody he knew a couple seats up, which was me, and then jumped up and sat down and started talking. And we talked about whether he was going to run for governor or maybe U.S. senator or what was going to be next for him. And it came down to where could he make the most difference in the shortest amount of time that could be meaningful and lasting. And then it got awkward because then Beau said to me, after talking about running for governor and running for senate, "So what are you doing these days, Brian?" I was like, "Well, I'm building a sports network for young millennials." And he's like, "Well, okay, yeah. How does that help people?" And it was really awkward. But it was a profound moment. I said, "What do you mean, Beau?" He said, "Well, it's going to be a great company, but why is that meaningful? Who does that help?" And we had some answers for it, but I'll tell you, that's a question that I remember every single week of my life, almost 2 years after that conversation. How is what I'm doing actually helpful? Beau had this incredible ability to be the most comfortable person in the room, but also make other people very uncomfortable in a short period of time, but in a way that made years of difference. I was the chief strategy officer to a governor, the governor of Delaware, which is why I was in the room with Beau. Anyway, we were doing this signing about domestic violence awareness, and the governor spoke movingly about how there were real people behind every one of these statistics, and everybody clapped, and everyone seemed very comfortable and very happy with themselves that they had raised awareness. And Beau did not look remotely comfortable. And then Beau stepped up, and instead of saying how great it was that we'd all gotten together and how amazing it was that we were all making a difference, Beau told the story about a woman who'd been murdered as a victim of domestic violence in front of her own children 2 blocks from that office 2 days beforehand. And the air left the room. And everyone there realized that Beau was right in a way that none of us, that nobody had been. That life is about individual people and individual lives and about action, not about words. And it was Beau's ability to make people uncomfortable, even in the governor's office, that really made people change. Now, Beau knows a bunch of HOBY ambassadors. He didn't get a chance to go to a seminar, but if he'd gone, he would have known that what's interesting about HOBY ambassadors is, despite being young leaders, how uncomfortable they are and sometimes when they get back to their high schools. Because it's a little awkward sometimes to be the 15-year-old that looks at poverty and homelessness and says, "Gosh, I want to do something about it." It's a little awkward to be the 16-year-old that says, "I've got an idea for a company and I want to spend my time on that instead of worrying about prom," or "I want to build something new instead of worrying about Spirit Week." And it's sort of awkward to be that person. And what HOBY does is it brings all of those people together and says, "You're not alone. What you care about is what's most meaningful." And it was a conversation that I saw Beau have with person after person. We're going to watch an amazing video about Beau, and it was taken at 2 different memorial services about his life. For those of you that don't know, Delaware, despite being proudly America's 49th largest state, take what you get, right? Own what you can. There's actually a big divide in the state between upstate and downstate. It's the only state in America divided by a canal because somebody thought that was a good idea 150 years ago. So for Beau, there was an upstate memorial service and a downstate service. And in the downstate service, the focus was on all of the incredible things that Beau had done. And the governor spoke movingly about the bills that Beau passed on domestic violence, the bills that Beau passed, bill after bill to protect children, and the bills that he passed on environmental justice, and the bills that he passed to keep people safer in their homes, and the legislation that he passed to make sure senior citizens were protected, and legislation after legislation after legislation. He might only have been the attorney general, but he had more bills pass every year than some governors have in their state of the state in an entire term. And then they went upstate, and the day before the president spoke, and leaders from around the world spoke, and most movingly, I thought, Beau's brother and sister and cousin spoke. People lined up to pay their respects to Beau. And it's Biden family tradition that you are not allowed to cut in line at a funeral. And so what that meant was that in those lines, which stretched for 6 hours, there were judges standing next to plumbers and pipe fitters. There were kids from Greenville standing next to kids from Felton. There were senior citizens waiting as person after person went by next to teenagers who were tweeting as person after person went by. There were people whose lives had been changed by the bills that Beau passed and the criminals he prosecuted. And there were soldiers that served with Beau Biden in Iraq, that saw Beau live his own record of service by volunteering when he didn't have to, and even as Attorney General, being willing to be mobilized while his father was running for Vice President of the United States. Beau Biden knew he was no better than anyone, and when he was called to serve, damn it, he was going to do it. And hour after hour, people got to see each other and tell their own stories about Beau and find their own connection. The retired firefighter who'd moved down to Florida, about how Beau made him feel so alive and about how the family made him feel so connected, and the senior citizen that knew him when he was a little kid, and the teenager that heard him speak in middle school when he was just a 12-year-old and couldn't believe that somebody like Beau Biden would take the time to talk to him and try and protect him about things like cybersecurity. And that same sense of connection, HOBY may not do it hundreds of thousands of people at a time the way Beau was able to do, but it brings people together and ignites that spark that says we have something in common. And the moment that is always most amazing at the HOBY seminars, we don't mention that it's Robert Kennedy, but it's really a Robert Kennedy moment where, Robert Kennedy looks at things as they could be and say, why not? And it's this phrase, why not me, that is really the magical moment in each of HOBY when that 15 and 16-year-old says, well, why not me? Why can't I do that? And you won't find a family in America that's been more alive or embodies the idea of why not me than the Biden family. Because for a 29-year-old county councilman to say, somebody's got to run against this popular governor turned incumbent senator, why not me? And then win and become vice president of the United States. Or the story of his little sister who looked at her big brother and said, somebody's got to manage that campaign. Why not me? And then go on and do that for leaders all over the world. Or about her daughter, Missy, that walked away from her own job to say, somebody's got to manage my cousin Beau's campaign. Why not me? It's about Hunter looking at something like global hunger and saying, somebody's got to do something about it. Why not me, and do it? It's about their sister who said, somebody needs to be most committed to Delaware's neediest and most at-risk children. Why not me? And then Ashley went from that to start her own foundation. And it's the question that Haley asks. Haley, who's got more pain on her shoulders than just about anybody could bear and is raising her own children, decides to help launch the Beau Biden Foundation and in some ways become a surrogate mom to tens of thousands of kids all over Delaware and eventually all over the world, many of whom I hope grow up to be HOBY ambassadors. And say, why not me? It's an incredible family, and Beau was, as his father said, perhaps one of the most incredible of all. He reminds us that we are all on the hook to live lives full of more purpose than we think we can. Beau puts us on the hook tonight by accepting this award to live lives of purpose with wide eyes and open hearts, and to remember that we don't ever have the time we think we have with our loved ones, so let's make the most of every moment.